Over the last couple of years, I've made a lot of mental health content, helping people deal with things like depression and anxiety, or maybe trauma from the past, and all these different things, and all from a biblical perspective. But there is a heck of a testimony that has brought me to the point where I can do that. I can teach on those things. And if you're new here, my name's Christian, and in this video, we're going to be discussing my testimony. And especially as it pertains to my mental health, God saving me from the deepest, darkest pits of my mind to where I am today. My prayer is that you will be inspired by this and understand that the same God that worked for me can work for you too. So growing up, I've dealt with a decent, or at least I've experienced a decent amount of stress when it comes in different areas, especially when it comes to like financial stress. With every bill you could pretty much think of that someone can pay, I've gone without that thing, and not to say that I've survived, got provided ultimately, but it did play a role in some things, and it started to add on to my mental health. It started to slowly hurt it, and also with familial conflict, and also with like family conflict, things like that. I'll make a whole nother video on that specifically, because that's a whole thing. But issues at home, if you have dealt with that, you understand where I'm coming from. Also, if I do sound a little weird, allergies is low-key kicking my butt right now, so bear with me. So then moving on into like around high school age, I was probably like around 14 or so, like 14, 15. That's when like there was some decent bit of financial stress, and just in general, it was pretty stressful for me, and I didn't express that at all, because I felt like I didn't want to add on to whatever things that was already happening, So I kind of hid everything, how I was feeling, or issues that I had internally, and that really did play a role in deteriorating my mental health, deteriorating how I was going about life. Even though I grew up in church, I just felt really, I felt distant from the church also at that point, because I dealt with a lot of social anxiety, like a ton, to the point where standing in a room with people, like a lot of people, more than a few people, like would make my heart rate increase, and I'll be sweating, and it was a struggle, definitely. In addition to this, in high school and really throughout middle school and high school, I was seen as, the smart kid, honor roll, principal's list, that kind of thing, rewards, all that. Awards, things like that. And in order to still have that image, I felt like I couldn't really express the things I was dealing with, things I was struggling with. And especially if you grew up in that world at all, if you are aware of that world of like, being like honors and, AP and things like that, they really do encourage perfection and a sorts. And it's not direct, but they do. They talk, talking about college and, how you present and how you look from the age of like 13. So like that was drilled into my mind to essentially be perfect, to essentially be well-rounded since I was like a teenager, like a really young teenager too. And because of that, I became so goal oriented, where it was basically goal obsessed, where it came at the point where actually at the age of like 16, I had my entire life planned out. I was like, okay, I'm going to be in med school by this age. I'm going to graduate by this age. I'm going to have a house by this age. I had everything mapped out and planned out. And it really, truly, something I'll say is that, like, even talking about my past, I don't have a problem with remembering things from the past, but I do have a problem with remembering how I felt. I really think that's because I really shut down how I was feeling, like shut down like my access to my emotions or access to how I was perceiving things, where I just tried to basically become a robot, where nothing else mattered except me excelling in school, nothing else mattered except me doing well. But obviously the financial issues and things like that at home did play a role in that, and made it even harder to obtain that image. So if my grades did dip a little bit, and I wasn't expressing what was going on at home really, and I wasn't expressing how I was feeling, it just seemed like I was slacking. And plus with the undiagnosed ADHD, it really was really stressful. It was just every day it was just like a lot of stress that I tried to ignore, and I don't think I've truly even understood at that age. Yeah, and truthfully, me being like that, putting my entire everything into how I, being perfect in grades and being well-rounded. I was in all the clubs, and I was a double performer. So I played the cello in orchestra, I sung in choir, I did the after-school music programs, I did the extracurriculars with music. I was in it, right? I was really in it, right? And it essentially became my identity, where I saw everything that I did as an opportunity to look better on paper, an opportunity to look better for colleges, an opportunity to just be better, to be more perfect, right? And making that part of my identity made any issues that would affect how I performed that much more detrimental to my mental health, and that much more detrimental to how I saw myself. Where things really did take a dip, I almost like lost it. Where I couldn't imagine who I was outside of those things. And mind you, this is something that really has played a huge role in how I view things and view education and view things like that, because I am someone who loves learning, but it can become obsessive, where even today, honestly, I do struggle with it at times, where I have to take a break and I have to remind myself that my education, my knowledge isn't the entirety of who I am. And around 15 or so is when I really started to flirt with the idea of suicide, where it wasn't something I think I was going to do at any point, but it was something that I think my mind kind of floating around in my mind. I think it was like a suicidal ideation, where yeah, I really was interested in the idea of suicide, or the thought of dying. And around that time, I think that's when had I didn't really see it as God at that moment, but looking back a couple years later after that, when I was like around 17 or so, is when I really understood that it was God that prevented me from taking my own life, or removing those thoughts from my mind, and kind of orienting me in a different way. So, and even throughout high school, again, the social anxiety was really bad. I had friends, but it wasn't like anything um, deep or meaningful in any kind of way. Right. And I hung out with them after school. I really didn't understand the need to hang out with people after school. I feel like in that capacity, I was pretty late with, the social aspect, where I just didn't understand why people even wanted to do that. And I think I kind of convinced myself I didn't even want to do it, because have how far and distant it seemed to be, where it didn't even seem possible for me to even be in that world. So fast forward to around the end of high school, around me graduating or so. That's when I went straight into college right after high school. And I got a job. At that job, I was a really bad people pleaser. That whole mindset of being perfect extended there too, where and especially once I realized I was good at the job, even though it was just like at a restaurant, I started to go up the ranks, and started to get promoted and things like that. And I noticed how people saw me, and I noticed how people would look to me in order for help, or look to me as someone who knew what they were doing and is competent. And that's something I really thrived off of, because still that was a deep rooted part of my identity. People seeing me as competent and people seeing me in a certain light. So that's something that it really did lead to a bad path of people pleasing, where it was like really like toxic, and plus people will take advantage of that as well, which is the reason why I'm so passionate about people pleasing, or helping people break away from it from a biblical perspective, because it really did take my eyes off of God a lot, where essentially pleasing others became my God. Look how my appearance and how I was perceived became my God. And even though throughout all of this, I was a believer, where I believed if I was to die, I would be with Jesus, it wasn't, the relationship wasn't developed at all. Like, even throughout high school, the idea of being with God for all of eternity scared the heck out of me, because I was like, and do what? Like, it was really strange for me. So around like when I was like 19 or so, I went through a little bit of a shrink phase, where I don't think I was doing anything like wild, but I was just kind of doing my own thing. I was just focused on school, focused on going to medical school and things like that. That was my whole identity. I didn't really care. I knew God was there, but I didn't understand that He loved me so much where He would even care to know what I was doing. I know I grew up hearing God has a plan for you, but I was like, okay, I don't know where you get this plan, or I don't know. I was just so confused with that. So I was just kind of doing my own thing. It was just my plan. And then I knew God was there and He loved me. He died for me. But outside of that, I really didn't understand the relationship part of it. So fast forward to a little bit to 2020. I understand that I am not alone with this, where that is the year where I got really locked in with God. Once the shutdown happened, it was really interesting. I think, yeah, there's a lot of people. I know there's probably some of you could testify to this, where you just really started getting that's either when you got saved or you really started getting a little more focused with God. And that's what happened with me. So actually, I remember there was a point in time where I was talking to an old friend who was not a Christian, and I made a joke of some kind, and he made a reference of like basically saying like, oh, like you should take like the Christ out of your name because my name is Christian. And he said it in a joking way, but I took that very seriously. It kind of woke me up a little bit, and to see how far I was from, being a Christian, like to the point where people would not see me as a Christian. That really scared me and woke me up a bit. So I remember like around that time during like the lockdown in like 2020, when everything started, one day I just woke up and I just wanted to read the Bible. I just had like a fiery passion to read the Bible. And it was strange because the days prior, I really didn't pick up my Bible that much. I prayed sometimes over my food or something like that. But the whole idea of prayer and things like that seemed kind of distant because I didn't understand how God loved me fully. So yeah, I woke up and I remember I dove right into Proverbs and I was obsessed with it. I was just reading and reading every day. And then I forgot the next book I got into, but I was just obsessed with reading the Bible at that point in time. Now, during this time where I was getting, starting to get a little more closer to God, I did still struggle with my mental health. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about talking to Christians about mental health, because I feel like a lot of testimony videos where it's like, God saved, I was suicidal, I was depressed, and then I got saved, and God delivered me from those things. But a lot of us really do struggle with those things while we're still believers, and where I think it's important to talk about how our journeys aren't perfectly straight, and they aren't constantly on an incline, in the sense that each day we feel like we're getting closer to God, or we have dips, we have our prodigal son moments. And that's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about it, because it really does happen, because it's happening to me and I know I'm not alone. So it's actually interesting, around this time is when like the 2020 to 2021 is around where my mental health really hit like the worst it's ever been, where I was probably the closest to taking my life, truly, where I did struggle with self-harm. The way I did it was a little bit different than what people imagine, where I would work myself to death, because like it felt good I felt like I was feeling something, even if it was like exhaustion or pain. It felt like something. And I remember, like, to get into a little bit more specifics, I remember in my job, there was like this thing of hot water that we would put like soups and stuff in, and mac and cheese, whatever, to heat everything up, to then serve. And I remember I would grab things like straight from it. It was called like the rethermalizer. I would grab it straight from the thing, and it was like boiling water. And then I would feel pain. It didn't bother me that much. And I think I gained like a high pain tolerance because it felt good to feel something, even if it was that pain. So that's the way I went about self-harm. And truthfully, it did extend to more things, where I remember there was one night, actually, I think I was a manager at that point, where it was like snowing, and my mental health was like so bad because I was overlooked a lot in that job, which was what made it worse. It made it a lot worse because I worked so hard and I was overlooked a lot. And so I remember I went outside and it was snowing and I was crying, and I had like a pen that I broke. I was just breaking pens. I don't know. I went to my car, and this shows you how much I really didn't care, because I just left the store while I was the manager. And I was sitting outside in the snow crying, and I broke the pen, and I was like cutting myself with the broken edge of the pen. I kept cutting myself, and then that's when I really understood how much God truly cared about my mind and cared about mental health. And I don't know. I feel like it was like a moment that really sticks with me, because I remember hearing like a voice in my head, I remember hearing a voice, and it was like such a somber. I knew it was God. It was in such a somber tone. God asking me, "Christian, what are you doing?" And I started crying after that, because it felt like, because to understand that I was seen in that moment where I felt so unseen, and where I felt like so overlooked, and because of how I performed, and because of how perfect I looked and outside in certain ways, but God still saw me, and he didn't just see me as what I was doing. He saw me as his son and was concerned. And that's something that really just stick with me. And anytime I think about, I think about, does God really care? Just going back to even that, just that moment. There's so many other moments, but going to that back to that moment alone, just really does remind me, like, God really does care for me, and He cares for us when we're suffering, and He's with us. And Psalm 34, I think it's Psalm 34, Psalm 34 or Psalm 38. I'm pretty sure it's Psalm 34, but I could be wrong. God is close. God is near to those who are brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. And that's something that I really just stick with. Like that verse is something that really has. There's certain verses that hold you over in certain seasons of your life, and that was one for me in that season of my life. Yeah, and I wish I could say it got better right after that, but it didn't really. Um, I understood I had to fight like hell. Like truthfully, I had to fight in order to stay alive. It was like a battle. It was a true battle. So when I understand the battle with fighting to stay alive, it's like, and it was like a battle where no one else saw, but it was a battle against my own mind, and it was hard and difficult and so difficult. Oh my gosh, um, where I've almost attempted several times. Where I remember driving and I was going like 50, 70, 90 miles per hour, and I was like, I'm gonna crash into a tree. This is it. I'm gonna crash into a tree. Or even just feeling like a gentle tug on my spirit to slow down and doing it. And it's I can think there's nothing but God that I'm the reason I'm standing here today. Because I would have taken my life 100% a long time ago. Um, it's weird. Even sometimes it's even weird to think of myself at this age, because I really pictured myself I was really content with dying, and not in the sense of like, oh, I'll be with God. I was just content with death. It felt like so good to die. Or even things like the suicidal ideation, where I wouldn't check, look both ways before crossing the street, because if a car hit me, great. That was my mentality. Or I would drive recklessly sometimes, or I wouldn't care if I got hit. Or there's a point in time I really wanted to join the military, and I think my reason behind it was really bad. Where it was because I was so content with dying where I wanted to join the military. Actually, the thought of dying in some kind of attack excited me, and so there's a reason that didn't work out for me to go in the military. But yeah, it was a lot, and plus so much anxiety I dealt with, on top of the depression, and it was just a lot. I was a mess, and so there's with the whole my job and that whole situation, where that eventually set me into therapy, because when I was actually training to become a manager, that's when I realized I had ADHD. I went to go get tested, because I did my job really well at my home store, but then when I went to a training store, they basically were like, "No, you have to do it in this particular way." And in my home store, I had more freedom to do things in a way that worked for me, and I got everything done. I was great at my job. I excelled. But having that on top of it, and someone constantly critiquing me on things I knew I was good at, it was really frustrating, and it really started to hit me hard in my identity, where I was like, am I like, is something wrong with me? And I was just like, it was just hard. And it kind of reminded me of being back in high school, where there's moments where I realized it was just because of undiagnosed ADHD, where I was like, I understand I'm smart enough for this, but why am I not understanding the material? Or why am I so unfocused? Or why do I procrastinate so much? Why do I always wait until the last minute? And that causes more stress and more anxiety. So it was just like a constant thing of like heaviness and stress and this tension in my mind, where it was just like no peace really. And yeah, that's something that God really did deliver me from, where I was sick a few years ago. God really has, God was working in that, but in that journey, God was really guiding me, where my faith was the thing I stood on. Where when I felt like there was no hope, not an ounce of hope, my faith is what I stood on. And even when I wasn't looking to God, God was still looking at me and still guiding me, still protecting me, and still loving on me, even when I wasn't showing love towards Him necessarily. And it wasn't until like really looking back, as I'm like, wow, God really has moved. God really did protect me. God really did, show His grace and love and mercy towards me. Because there's times I looked for peace in things, like look for peace in substances, like once in a while, or I look for peace. Really, my main thing was in my work and being a workaholic and education and things like that. So yeah, but growing to find peace in God guiding me to a point where even the old things I desired changed completely. Where I didn't want to become like a regular doctor anymore. Where I always had an interest in mental health, but now it's like something I'm working towards. I'm doing this, and then, and even in terms of schooling, that's something I'm more working towards. It's God has really moved, and it's hard to put into words truly how He has moved. But I do want to say that if you're struggling in this way, that you are not alone. God sees you. And even if it doesn't feel like God sees you, God doesn't see you, or it feels like God is far away, don't lean into that. Lean into the truth that God is there, that He loves you. Because if He did it for me, then He can very much do it for you. And, when I was praying on a video to make this week, God really put it to talk about my testimony, which is something I'm not 100% comfortable talking about all the time. Because talking about bad things with me is a little weird, because I just think it's just events. But I understand that someone needs to hear it. There's someone out there who's watching this video right now who feels like how I did, who feels alone, who feels like misunderstood, who feels, trapped, who feels like there's no hope, who feels like, God's not there for them, who feels in that way. Let me tell you that I'm a walking contradiction. There's a reason to have like a sticker back there that says walking contradiction, because, that's what I am. That's what I feel like I am, because it doesn't make sense how I'm here, and like nothing makes sense of why I'm here, and how the same things I struggle with, I'm able to teach other people to get through, and to break that mindset, from ADHD to anxiety to depression. That's nothing but the grace of God, and God works in that kind of way where, He'll take you out of this situation, He'll allow you to go through something, because then your story is going to be a testimony that saves someone's life. And I really feel like that's part of my calling. Yeah. So simply put, God saved my life. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for God. He cared about my mind. He cared about my mental health. He loves me even when I couldn't love myself. And that's something that alone can bring me to tears. But I'm not gonna cry right now. I usually do cry, but I'm not gonna cry right now. Yeah, so, and He loves you. And I really wish I was like, if I was next to you right now, whoever's watching this video, if I was next to you right now, I wish I could tell you right into your eyes. It isn't me telling you. God loves you. And He deeply cares. Whatever you're going through, He sees you. You're not alone. Understand that He so loves you. Like, you don't even understand, man, how much He loves you. And I didn't understand, but He's there for you. And call upon His name. And even if you may go through the fire, even if you're suffering, understand that this isn't the end. Because I understand that when you're in the midst of it, it feels like it is. I've been there. Trust me, I understand. Really, really, really well. But God delivered me from it. It wasn't my end. This is not going to be your end. You may have to fight. You may have to believe something you can't even see yet. But the Lord is faithful. The Lord is just. The Lord is kind. He loves you so much. So much. Like, God loves you so much. Like, and even if you don't fully understand it, taste and see that the Lord is good. That's all I really got for you guys. I really hope that whoever needed to see this video, whoever God called me to make this video for, saw it and is touched by it. I love you guys so much. This is why I do this. And remember, you got this because God's got you. Peace out.